All right, wonderful. It is 10:33 on Sunday, November 14, 2021. Good morning and welcome to the Media Center here at the Office of the Prime Minister in Kingston, Jamaica. This morning, Prime Minister the Most Honorable Andrew Holness will host a media briefing and address the nation on matters of critical importance. With the Prime Minister this morning, we have the Deputy Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Horace Chang, and he's also the Minister of National Security. Along with Dr. Chang, we have Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda, and he is the Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security. Lieutenant General Rocky Meade, the Chief of Defence Staff, along with Major General Anthony Anderson, the Commissioner of Police, is also here, along with the country's Attorney General, Marlene Malahoo Fort. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Naomi. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me this morning. Please forgive me for taking your Sunday morning to deal with these issues, but they are of significant national importance. Just past midnight, the Governor General declared on the advice and recommendation of the government, being advised by the Chief of Defence Staff and the Commissioner of Police. States of public emergencies were declared in the police divisions of St. James, Westmoreland, and Hanover. These three are termed the tri-parish SOEs. And in the corporate area, the St. Andrew South Police Division, the Kingston West Police Division, the Kingston Central Police Division, and the Kingston East Police Division. All of these divisions have seen increases ranging from 16% to 57%. All have murder rates per 100,000 in excess of the regional average, which is 15%. In fact, the murder rate per 100,000 in these divisions range from a low of approximately 47 per 100,000 to 190 per 100,000. We have decided to recommend the declaration of SOEs, having regard to the increase in murders compared year on year, both in the communities in which we have declared them and nationally. And these increases we consider to be of an extensive scale, such that they threaten public safety, both in the communities in which the SOEs have been declared and nationally. But more than that, we have decided to declare the SOEs because of the nature and frequency of the violence surrounding the murders and other crimes. And I'm sure every Jamaican would have recognized that the nature and frequency of the violence has devolved to a level of barbarity, a level of savagery. It is almost a competition for cruelty, the worst of the worst, and it appears to be designed, properly calculated to drive fear into the citizenry of the country and panic in communities. The government cannot remain crippled. It cannot see these things happening and not take action. So this morning, we are announcing the declaration of states of public emergencies in, and I will repeat, the police divisions in which the SOEs have been declared, the St. James Police Division, the Westmoreland Police Division, Hanover Police Division, St. Andrew South, Kingston West, Kingston Central, and Kingston East. I'll now invite the Commissioner of Police to give further details. CP.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and good morning to the officials here and also to everyone who's viewing. So despite continued police action against offenders, violent offenders, prosecutions of criminal gangs and gang members, the persistent epidemic of violence continues. Criminals armed with illegal firearms continue to kill our people. We have a murder rate that persists at a level of 3 times our regional average and 8 times the global average. Since COVID-19, a number of jurisdictions globally have seen increases in criminal violence and murder of up to 30%, and even beyond. Our murders this year have increased by 10%. However, this 10% is 10% of a persistently, unacceptably high number, which means Jamaica's homicide rate remains within the top 5 countries in the world. As at November the 12th, 2021, our serious crime data shows that we have an increase in murder. Shootings have remained largely flat, but other crimes are trending downwards. What this means is that we have a violence problem. We have a problem with persons who are willing to take up guns and kill. And as the Prime Minister said, some of the things we have seen recently, where young men see fit to cut off somebody's head and play football with it, is indicative of a change, a shift in the nature of violence. The loss of lives of our people, largely by members of criminal gangs, accounts for about 70% of all of our murders. There is another 19% that is caused by an inability of us to resolve our personal differences without violence. But that 70+% is significant of all murders that are committed by criminal gangs. But there are other victims, and those who are shot but do not die and spend months in state medical care, also those who are left behind to fend for themselves and to mourn, and entire communities that live in fear. Now, of particular concern were those police divisions that were outlined by the Prime Minister. And based on what we have seen there, we requested states of public emergency to be put in place in those 7 police divisions, those of Westmoreland, Hanover, and St. James, and those of St. Andrews South, Kingston West, Kingston Central, and Kingston East. As at Friday, there were 1,240 victims of murder. 392 of those were killed across the 4 divisions in Kingston and St. Andrew, which represents 32% of the national figure. Of the 1,100 persons shot but who were not killed, that region accounted for 391 of the victims, or 36% of the national figure. In the parishes of St. James, Westmoreland, and Hanover, there have been 272 victims of murder. This represents 22% of the national figure, while 214 persons were shot and injured, also representing 22% of the national figure. Not included in the statistics are the 11 murders that took place over the last 24 hours that were reflected in this morning's crime report. 5 of these murders took place in Westmoreland. 4 of these murders took place in that Southern Crescent that we're talking about. So of the 11, 9 of them took place in the areas that we are that the state of public emergency has been imposed in. And all of those that we're talking about were conducted with illegal firearms. These gangs that are doing this largely are funded through the drug for gun trade, through extortion, through scamming, and also financed from local and overseas criminal organizations. Let me just have everybody or assure everyone that the imposition of states of public emergency regulations in particular spaces does not remove or detract from any other policing methods that will be used and have been employed recently against these highly violent offenders. It is in addition to. So we will continue our investigations. We will continue our deployments across the entire country. We'll continue our partnerships with our local partners and overseas partners to discover the whereabouts of these gangs and to seek these convictions. This state of public emergency is designed to reduce violence in the communities as quickly as possible and to reduce fear. Our annual murder rate has been above the 1,000 mark for so long that sometimes we're in danger of seeing that as a baseline from which we start to do measures. That is not acceptable. Those 1,000 are 1,000 lives. And anything we can do to reduce the numbers of people being killed is something we should do without delay. It's incumbent on us, all of us, to be a part of this, to lend support to this, to ensure that less and less of our people are killed. The public can assist, again, by contacting our Crime Stop at 311, passing information to the police, by complying with the requests of security officers at checkpoints, by adhering to curfew guidelines and other guidelines, and certainly notifying us of anything that might come to your attention that may assist in this regard. We remain, as the JCF, committed to this process. Our officers have demonstrated their commitment to, as best as possible, using all the tools that we have to keep Jamaica safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I now invite our Chief of Defence Staff to give the boundaries and other details about the actual geographical imposition of the states of public emergency. CDS.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister Samuda, Attorney General, Commissioner, members of the media, citizens of Jamaica, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. You've heard an analysis of the situation that has necessitated the actions that are now being taken by the security forces. Since the start of the year and under the continued impact of COVID-19, we've made continued efforts to deter and combat the rise in violent crime across the island, including in the police divisions mentioned. We continue to highlight the major contributors to the current abnormal situation includes the prevalence of illegal weapons, gang activity, and the ripple effects of scamming and trafficking and other illegal activities. In the West, both Westmoreland and Hanover are known as displacement areas for gang members from St. James in particular. In the East, the modus operandi of the gangs has seen numerous drive-by attacks, home invasions, alliances with other gangs outside of their territory. The security situation has proven to be well beyond the sphere of normal routine policing, and the JDF can more effectively assist the JCF if we have the powers we have requested. As a result of making the recommendations to the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister to the Governor General, and having had the declaration, the Jamaica Defense Force and the Jamaica Constabulary Force deployed starting at midnight tonight, and most of the troops were in place by 6 this morning to the areas that were indicated. I will now give an indication of the boundaries of the respective police divisions, starting first with the Kingston and St. Andrew space. So the boundaries for the areas under the state of public emergency for St. Andrew South, Kingston West, Kingston Central, and the Kingston East police divisions are as follows. To the north, the boundary will start at the westernmost end of the Belvedere to Ferry secondary road, extending in an easterly direction along the Belvedere to Ferry Road, and then continue easterly to the foot of Red Hills, the intersection of Perkins Boulevard, Mullines Road, and Red Hills Road. The northern boundary then continues in a southeasterly direction along Mullines Road, Seaward Drive, Mimosa Road, Aloe Avenue, Bay Farm Road, Newark Avenue, Elm Crescent, Keysing Avenue, Hagley Park Road, Omar Road, Chisholm Avenue, then on to Maxfield Avenue and Russell Road in an easterly direction to Lyndhurst Road at its intersection with Slipe Road. Then it goes easterly along Torrington Road to Hero Circle and then continues to Connolly Avenue, then on to Dames Drive to the intersection of South Camp Road. The boundary then proceeds onto Vineyard Road, Diana Drive to Lexington Avenue, then onto Denier Road to the intersection with Mountain View Avenue. The boundary then extends in an easterly direction along an imaginary line as outlined on the map to the shared parish border of St. Andrew and St. Thomas. To the east, the boundary continues in a southerly direction along the sheer parish border of St. Andrew and St. Thomas along the coast, to the coast. In the south, the boundary extends westerly along the coast of St. Andrew, then along the Kingston coastline to the Kingston Container Terminal, and then to the Portmore Causeway Bridge. Finally, to the west, the boundary continues in a northwesterly direction from the Portmore Causeway Bridge to the Fresh River, then along the shared parish border of St. Andrew and St. Catherine, west of Riverton, and extends to intersect with the northern boundary at the westernmost end of the Belvedere to Ferry Road. With respect to the areas under state of public emergency in western Jamaica, that is St. James, Westmoreland, and Hanover, it's a bit more straightforward as it essentially comprises the entire land area of the parishes of St. James, Westmoreland, and Hanover within the established parish boundaries. But more specifically, they are: to the west, the boundary extends in another direction along the coast of Westmoreland, and then Hanover to the coast at Lucy in Hanover. To the north, the boundary starts from Lucy in Hanover and then extends in an easterly direction along the coast of Hanover to St. James, to the coastal intersection of St. James and Trelawney Parish boundaries. To the east, the boundary extends in a southerly direction along the shared parish borders of St. James, Trelawney, St. Elizabeth, and Westmoreland to the coast. Finally, to the south, the boundary continues along the coastline of Westmoreland to the westernmost point of the island at the west end of Westmoreland. We are committed and have ensured that all members of the security forces are fully cognizant and trained in how to interact with our citizens, respecting their rights. But we rely on you for support and information. We therefore ask the citizens who live and work and have to travel within these areas to be mindful of the declaration and cooperate with the security forces on the ground. The Commissioner previously indicated some of what is suggested. We're all working towards a common goal of ridding Jamaica of crime and recognizing that this can only be achieved through unified and direct effort. Crime affects all Jamaicans, and we can all play our part. We're asking for persons who can assist us to call, in addition to the 311 line noted by the Commission already, the JDF tip line of 876-837-8888. This support is key to us being able to be proactive in being effective with this effort. In closing, let me reaffirm that the JDF and JCF are committed to Jamaica and Jamaicans, and we're working towards changing the culture of violence in Jamaica towards conditions that would facilitate normal policing and not require the deployment of the military on a routine basis on our streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CDS. I now invite the Minister of National Security, or Deputy Prime Minister, to give a brief overview of the general situations that would have prompted the government to make this declaration.
Thank you, Prime Minister, colleague Minister Samuda, Attorney General, Commissioner of Police, and Chief of Staff. Citizens listening in, good morning to you this morning. State of public emergency is a legitimate security measure that provides immediate reduction and criminal violence in the community. It's a strategic tool that saves the lives, reduces homicide rapidly, and provides reprieve to the families who live in a permanent state of fear because of the brutality and brazen actions of violence producers in several communities named. The state of public emergency is just one of the tools that the security forces utilize to stem the higher rates of homicides, stop the bloodletting, and create a space for normal policing operations. The fact is, the murder rates across the Southern Crescent, as indicated by the Chief of Staff and the Commissioner of Police and the Prime Minister, and in the tri-parish here of Western Jamaica, combined has accounted for well over 55% of the homicide. In fact, the persistent rate is between 55 and 65% of the homicide rates in an area where the population is less, just under 40% of the total population. For the residents of these communities, these statistics relate to family members, neighbors, sons, daughters, and friends who were killed by heartless armed thugs. The state of emergency within the area is to restore some sense of normalcy for these families so they can feel safe enough to walk through their communities without fear of gang reprisals. The children can sleep comfortable, do their homework without the sound of gunshots. The state of public emergency is for these people, our people, who deserve to live in an environment that is free of criminal violence. Between January 18, 2018 and January 31, 2019, when the first SOE was declared in St. James, there was a reduction of some 70% in homicides and shooting. The increase this year alluded to by the Prime Minister and the Commissioner of Police is on that post-SOE period, where they've gone up by 54%. The escalating violence and the brutality and the character of the violence cannot be allowed to continue. The state must intervene to protect the citizens and the lives of its people. Gang violence has been largely contributing upward trend in these murder rates and the shooting and the character of the homicide outlined. As a government, we have to give our commitment to the people of Jamaica to do what is necessary to break the back of criminal violence in Jamaica. The gangs are heavily armed, and we must provide the security forces all the tools they need to undermine, disrupt, and remove these criminals from the middle of society. Solving this endemic ecosystem of criminal violence cannot be achieved with knee-jerk reactions. The government has been utilizing a combination of different security measures to respond to the criminal situation in Jamaica, where violence will utilize, where the violence justifies it, we will always seek to require significant powers as under the state of public emergency. But we continue to prioritize social investment to sustainable crime, for sustainable crime reduction and social transformation. We'll build out the associated services for swift and short justice, such as forensic science, ballistic and pathology capabilities, equipment of police force, and all is required to ensure security forces have the required tools to defeat the gangs and win this war. We'll continue investing strategically in Jamaica's security response to crime. We are confident by staying this course, we'll break the back on the scourge of crime, of violence in Jamaica. This is a commitment of the government of Jamaica to the people of Jamaica and the residents in the affected communities. I am not only optimistic, I'm confident if the security forces are given the requisite tools in terms of both their personnel, institutional reform and development, and required legal tools, as we are now doing with the state of public emergency and several other pieces of legislation, we will win this war against criminal violence. Thank you.
Thank you, DPM. We will now take questions. I have the Attorney General here with me, and I intend to direct almost all the questions that will arise regarding any legal aspect of the SOEs for the Attorney General to respond. But we're open for questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister. Already I see hands online. For those who are from the media online, we already had a quick briefing in terms of the protocol here, in terms of being able to transfer to being a panelist to ask questions and other protocols. I now recognize Mr. Roxroy McLean, who is from the Star newspaper. Roxroy, good morning.
Good morning, Mrs. Francis. Good morning, Mr. Onis, members of your distinguished panel. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Onis, back in 2015, as leader of opposition, you encouraged Jamaicans to raise their voices in concert against the high levels of crime and against the government for not doing enough in controlling crime. With respect to the downward trend of figures quoted as it relates to serious crimes and shootings, I want to ask you the following questions. Do you still hold that conviction? And how should people hold the government responsible for the murder rate? To what extent do you see a manifestation of people holding the government responsible for the murder rate? And my two final questions, how would you rate your government and the performance of the minister, the security minister, and the police commissioner as it relates to combating crime and violence?
Well, let me start with your last question first. The Commissioner of Police, the Minister of National Security, the Chief of Defense Staff have all been doing, in my judgment and grading, a very good job with the resources that they have and the particular circumstances which are, in some instances, unique to Jamaica and very extreme, that they have been doing a very good job in tackling the issues. There are, however, some issues that are over and above the capacity of regular law enforcement to address. This is not a new point that I have made, and this is not a point to be taken in a political way. There are circumstances that whoever is the government, whichever government, the nature of our crime and the nature of our violence is such that it is over and above the capacity of the existing institutions of the state to address. The government has been in a political debate, particularly with the opposition, regarding how we can increase the immediate capacity of the state to respond to the scale of the increase in crime and the nature of the violence in crime. We have pioneered the use of the SOE in responding to what can only be described as a national emergency. We have used the extra powers given in the declaration of states of public emergency to attenuate the problem. And we have used it in such a way that we are respectful of the human rights and dignity of the citizens, and at the same time, whenever we have used the SOEs, it has brought down murders and has returned a sense of safety and security both to the communities in which we have implemented them and nationally. So the political debate is one which surrounds whether or not the tool is constitutional. And that is a debate which is a legitimate one. We don't in any way shy from it. And it is proceeding. The Attorney General has been very effective in working through the issues that are involved. But until there is a definitive ruling on the matter, the tool remains available, legitimately so, because there are emergencies for which the government must respond. Now, forgive me for raising this point on a Sunday morning, but, you know, it is one thing to commit the ultimate act of a murder, but when you start to see a devolution into what can only be described as the ultimate barbarity, savagery, a competition for cruelty, the worst of the worst, where you only see these kinds of actions happening in war zones, where someone can be beheaded. And their heads used to, as a football, sent back to the families. So yes, we are seeing an increase in murders, but we are also seeing a new trend of savagery and barbarity in violence, which can only be concluded, designed to undermine confidence in the state, to increase the fear and panic, and to disrupt the society. And you can find many such instances. So for us, we have to respond to this emergency. You know, upon reflection, there is a sense that 1,000 murders is normal. In fact, that has been a view expressed by even some people in Parliament, that when our Bill of Rights was being crafted, it was crafted with the understanding that there were 1,000 murders. So that would be what is considered to be normal in a democratic society. It is not normal to have 1,000 murders in a society like ours, not even in a war zone. The murder rate per 100,000 regionally is 15 Globally, it is 6. In some of the communities that we have declared SOEs, the murder rate ranges from 47 per 100,000 to as high as somewhere in the region of over 100 per 100,000. How is that normal? How is that not an emergency? And should the government be crippled by an academic debate about the constitutionality of the measure while people in Jamaica are dying? What do I say to the family of that young man whose head was taken and kicked around? What does the opposition say to them? Do we not all have a responsibility to save lives? And should we allow more people to die while we satisfy ourselves about an academic issue? Because it is purely academic. Every society must have powers to deal with exceptional circumstances and emergencies. There is a bigger picture, my friend, and I'm glad you have asked these questions, which we have been wrestling with as a government. Are our laws sufficient? Are they properly crafted to deal with the current threats that Jamaica faces? And the answer is no. They're not. The government has to jump through hoops to satisfy conditions which tie its hands, makes it ineffective to give security to its citizens. And part of the work that we have been doing behind the scenes is not just to try and fix one piece or fix another piece. There has to be a total overhaul. Because the way our things are structured now, it takes too long and it doesn't achieve the results. You will see that the government of Jamaica has ensured that we follow what is the conventional and standard practices of good policing. All the arguments that you're hearing about the ineffectiveness of the police and the lack of resources, those arguments need to be balanced out by the reality that with a limited budget, this police force, your police force, has brought several of the most dangerous gangs that were formerly protected when we could have taken action to undermine them, erode them, displace them. They were protected. But this police force, even without the exceptional powers of an SOE, invested significant time and resources to build cases. I don't think the public understands that an entire police division has to be built and then put to investigate for months, years. Then we have to put up witnesses and protect them, the cost of doing that. Then we have to properly document and build a case and take it to court. When was that done before? I want the people who want to criticize the police to at least once say, "Good job, Commissioner. Good job." That change is happening before your very eyes. So there is no question that we are investing in standard policing. But that is not going to bring the results tomorrow. next week. It is going to take some time. But in the interim, the murder rate is increasing. People are dying. That is the definition then of an emergency. And we have to act. I say to the people of Jamaica, always hold your government to account. I made a commitment to the people that I will do everything within my powers to ensure their safety. Without question, murders have been a challenge. The problem is deeper than a security one. Indeed, I believe we have solved the security element of the problem, meaning that I believe we have made sufficient reform to the police force in terms of their intelligence gathering capabilities, in terms of their investigative capabilities, and in terms of their policing capabilities. But there is another element of the problem, and that is violence. And that is a disease which gives a great propensity to those who are infected by it, this disease of violence, to seek to resolve conflict by a resort to the ultimate death. That is not a policing problem. That is a social problem that we are asking the police to respond to. And until we recognize that violence is similar in nature to a pandemic, to a disease, and we agree that the same principle that we have applied in the pandemic, where we declare it an emergency and we all as one society deal with it, until we recognize that, then we're going to continue to ask the police to solve a problem that has started in the breakdown of our families and our homes and our communities and national leadership and the degeneration of morality and civility in the society. And these are issues for which the government is also putting in place measures. We have put in place a commission to study the issue of violence and advise the government as to some of the things that we can do. And we have also put in place the commission to reform our education system. And these are two important planks of the social reform that is necessary to enable us not just to deal with the crime problem, which the police is dealing with. And if you were to separate crime from violence, you will see that crime is indeed going down year on year on year, because the police is getting better at addressing crime. The issue that we have is a violence problem, which you are seeing in the ultimate expression of violence, which is murder. And yes, it is a crime, but it is of a particular nature of extremity. And we are in an emergency with this matter. So my answer to you, my friend, my short answer, the government has done a very good job on addressing the issue of crime, of improving our security forces and their capabilities. There is a national challenge in Jamaica, a conversation which needs to be had about violence and its ultimate expression in murder. And that requires the use of emergency powers because it is an emergency.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Our next question from Ms. Jamila Maitland of TVJ. Jamila? Jamila, go ahead,
Hi,
please.
good morning. I'm Jamila from RJR, Gleaner Communications Group. I have a few questions. Prime Minister, while we're happy for the state of public emergency, I think as a media practitioner, my issue is not that, there are a lot of state of public emergency and the legality of it. It's more along the lines of holding some of these men, some of these women, whoever it is, in lockups for long periods of time without charging them. So it's not about, for me, about the state of public emergencies, about having, while these persons are locked up, investigations must be done to ensure that these persons are charged, within a specified period of time. And then it becomes an issue of whether or not the government is being prejudiced to some of these people in some of these communities, because we understand that if it were in other spaces, you couldn't hold these people for more than 48 hours, 2 days the most. So as a media practitioner, we want to see investigations being done, charges being laid on people, else you're going to have 100 people being locked up. And out of that, yeah, you may find a wanted man, but 2 persons charged out of that 100. So families are going to be upset about the fact that you're having these people locked up and you're not charging them, and then it's going to be an issue for the legality of it. So that's just one. From somebody in Central Kingston, they're asking me, why did it take so long for the government to intervene as it relates to a state of public emergency in the space? Because so many people have died in Central Kingston. That's like the backyard of the parliament. That's across the road from the divisional headquarters. Why did it take so long for the police or for the government to find some intervention in Central Kingston? That's one. There are several communities that have
pen and paper to note. So
yes.
You're going
fine. There are several communities with roadblocks. This is for the Commissioner of Police. Several communities have roadblocks, and if you went there, you'd think that they have a ZOSA or an SOE, when really, in fact, these are men who erected these roadblocks in the communities because of ongoing war, and we understand that, and they fear that drive-bys may happen or so. But you have the same police officers who drive around these roadblocks, not doing anything. And I understand it's a catch-22 situation, because you don't want to have remove the roadblocks, and then by nighttime come a drive-by happens because the police removed the roadblock. No, we want to see community meetings being held. We want to see, peace management in the communities. We want to see things happening in the meantime, because you don't want to remove the roadblock and you hear, all right, the police remove the roadblock. So what we're going to do? We're going to come and shoot up the ends. No. And
all right,
also,
Jamila, if you could allow them to answer, Jamila, I'm so sorry, but if you could allow them now to answer, you've said a mouthful, which is very good, and I really appreciate that.
About the roadblocks. So sure. So about the roadblocks.
Yes.
What is going to happen to some of these roadblocks in some of these communities that have basically formed a system of their own? Because I guess they're saying the police can't help us, so we have to help the community, and in and of itself, right, it becomes a system of itself. So what are the police doing about the roadblocks?
All right,
Rockford, Rosestown.
So let's allow them to answer the questions. I think you've raised 3 major questions in your whole soliloquy.
Jamila,
and we'll do that.
What I have heard from you is a passion, and it's a genuine passion reflective of how people feel generally. It is a passion, and it is also a frustration, which I understand for the average Jamaican, where things on the surface just seem logical. Central Kingston is in crisis. There is an emergency. Just put on the SOE. Jamila, that's how I feel. But when I go to Parliament, that's not the sentiment being expressed there in some quarters. And you may say, you have an overwhelming majority in the lower house. But for the SOEs to continue, for them to have the length of time, they need to be extended, and that extension requires a particular process, and in the Senate it requires a 2/3 majority. And that requires the opposition to agree. And the opposition has made their position clear on numerous occasions, even though, to their credit in the past, they have supported the use of SOEs, and they have been the SOEs, when declared and when used, they have been effective. Recently, the suggestions have been that there will not be support. And therefore, as I said, we have been involved in this ongoing political debate about the use of the SOEs. But, we have reached this point now where we have to do something. There is an emergency. The emergency, in our estimation, meets the standards set in our Constitution, and I believe we have acted by what is in our Constitution. So I want to say to the people of Central Kingston that it is not for want of doing. It's not for want of trying. But, you know, I think the people of Central Kingston need to bring their, you know, the question was asked before, how do citizens hold their governments to account? And I think in the sense that government not only meaning the executive, but also the opposition in parliament. The country needs to hold them to account as well. I think that is a point to be considered. But you raise another important point, which gives context to the dilemma that we face in dealing with crime. You pointed out, rightfully so, that we do not want a measure that is going to hold innocent young men and women, innocent Jamaicans, in detention for extended periods in violation of their rights. Jamelia, we have worked diligently to ensure that the process is one that is speedy in terms of the identification and screening. And you would see that even if detentions are done on a wide basis, very shortly thereafter, after it has gone through the necessary process, those numbers would have decreased significantly. Those that are held in detention, there is a process where they do get judicial attention, and we have sought to refine that process. I'll ask the AG in a moment to explain the changes in the regulations as to how it will operate. I dare say to you, Jamelia, that the police is not acting randomly in this matter. It is not acting discriminatory in this matter. The police is acting on intelligence, on cases and information that they have, and you're right, that during the period that these persons are held, that those cases, we are building them even further. But I will say to you that there are persons who have been detained in the states of public emergency and have been released. And upon their release, they have taken on the police. They have gone to commit other crimes. There is one such case which happened, I believe, in Riverton City, where for an important matter, which I'm sure as a journalist you could go and research it, but he was involved in an important matter before the courts, and he was also involved in a shooting with the police. And I would urge you to look at those, because then you would begin to start to understand this delicate balance that in trying to preserve rights, sometimes we end up threatening, and in fact, citizens can lose their lives. And I'm being very guarded in how I'm speaking. But some of the very people who we have held in detentions have gone out and gone on to commit more crimes and, in fact, to kill more people. So, yes, it is a balance that we have to ensure that the rights of the individual is protected, innocent or guilty. But at the same time, I have a duty to look for the rights of the Jamaican citizen, the innocent Jamaican citizen who is entitled to their safety and to their life. AG?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Good morning, everyone. In relation to detention, it's important that you understand that not everyone who is detained or will be detained in the state of public emergency will be charged with an offense. The law permits detention where it is reasonably necessary to prevent someone from committing an offense, and that will depend on what the assessment is on the ground. We have taken into account the many concerns that have been raised about the detention powers, and when the regulations are tabled in the Parliament, you will see a difference in how they've been drafted. Issues have also been raised about the review of detained persons, and we have also made some changes in that regard, and there will be an automatic periodic review in addition to review by request of detainees. I think essentially those are the major changes, but they are substantial changes based on a monitoring of the issues that arose in the previous dispensation.
Thank you, Madam AG. And Prime Minister, let's then go to, and let me apologize, I believe there was a technical glitch. For a second, the audio might have gone on only our Zoom platform, but I understand it's back. And reiterating prior that when we did the test, we did ask in terms of protocols, numbers of questions at one time, so all the presenters could follow. So let's then go to Ms. Dion Jackson-Miller of TVJ. And RJR, and I will recognize 4 other persons, and then we can wrap up. Good morning, Dion.
Thank you so much, Naomi. And Mr. Prime Minister, you spoke just now about debating the constitutionality of measures and satisfying ourselves about an academic exercise. Can you tell us if you're suggesting that questioning whether the executive is acting in accordance with the Constitution is an academic exercise? And if that's not what you meant, what did you mean? Second question is a follow-up on the AG's information just now. Are you saying, Madam AG, that the regulations, when they come, will deal with the concern that they breach the separation of powers? And just finally, is there not a concern that promulgating the states of emergency at a time when the Everton Douglas case is before the Court of Appeal would be seen as contemptuous of the courts and the judicial process? Thank you.
You know, I've decided to speak frankly on this matter. And there's one element of the conversation which is always hidden in the public debate. What of the rights of the victims? Who speaks for the people who have been killed? What of their constitutional rights? Who defends those rights of the 1,300 or more Jamaicans that have been murdered in this country? Is that academic? Or so it would appear. My job as Prime Minister is to preserve and protect the rights of the citizens, including those who are criminals and convicted and proven so, those who are suspected, and the rights of every citizen to their life. Were it a point that states of public emergency should not exist, were it a point that states of public emergency cannot be used or are foreign to our constitutional arrangement, then we would have to look at those arguments very carefully. But the point is that there is an emergency in the country. Our murder rate per 100,000 is the 5th highest in the world. It is way above the regional average of 15 and the global average of 6, several times over that. And the one tool that has worked, where the government has spent enormous resources and effort to ensure that as best as possible, we balance the rights of all involved and protect all involved. And we have not demonstrated any reluctance to change and improve and revise and fine-tune, as the Attorney General will tell you as we go along, to respond to this emergency. But for a political debate. But for a political debate. A political debate, mind you, which, even though the debate has gone on before, the rationale and the reason was seen, and there was an agreement for it to go on. So even in the debate, reason and rationality prevailed, and we were able to have SOEs implemented. So why now should we stop the SOEs? If there are issues relating to it, we have said, okay, bring the arguments, and we will make the adjustments. I think ultimately this is a question that the Jamaican people will have to answer. It's a question for the people. Should we not do the SOEs and allow the murder rate to escalate? Or should we move ahead with the SOEs, mindful and respectful, and doing everything possible to preserve the rights of all citizens? I think we know what the answer is. Jamila has expressed it from the citizens of Central Kingston. And that's what I meant to say. Of course, questions must be asked. Of course, the academic considerations must be contemplated. But the real issue is, should we stop as a result of those questions, of those debates? And I think the answer is no. AG.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I believe it's important to draw a distinction between a challenge on the facts of a particular case and challenges to the law. Very important distinction that has to be drawn. The case that is before the court did not rule the state of emergency unconstitutional. Issues were raised about referencing to the Constitution. And I know that all courts, from my reading of the law and from my reading of judgments, understand that governments have to act. There is a day-to-day running of government that must take place, and each branch of government is tasked with a separate and distinct responsibility, but all are working for the greater good. All are working for the greater good. So insofar as the referencing issue that was raised in the case, though it did not require a legislative action, because all judges are required to judicially notice the provisions of the Interpretation Act, the Parliament has acted to correct that reference. And that was passed in both houses of Parliament in the amendment to the Emergency Powers Act. That's one. A distinction also has to be drawn between the declaration of the state of public emergency, where the constitutional criteria are met, and the continuation of it, where the Parliament is empowered by resolution to extend it for a period not exceeding 3 months. So there is a distinction that is to be drawn and is to be understood. And just to say, Dion, as we sat without taking tales out of school and also without saying too much on cases that are before the court, and I listened and we interrogated the recommendations of the security chiefs, I remarked, and Prime Minister, just permit me to share publicly what I remarked privately in the meeting, that having listened to the reasons for recommendation and having satisfying myself as a principal legal advisor to the government that the facts came within the constitutional provision and the criteria set out in the Constitution. I'm of the view that if the government were formed by the party which is now in opposition, I don't know how they would reject the recommendation. I don't believe they would. But of course, governments have information that oppositions don't have. And so it's understandable that the debate will rage. You know, I find it unfortunate that there appears to be, in a certain section of the public, almost a setting up of tension between and among the branches of government. And I'm not talking about legitimate questions being raised. And let me just say unequivocally, Mrs. Jackson-Miller, that this government is not deliberately taking any action in breach of the Constitution. But you do know that the actions of government will be reviewed by the courts, and in the process of review may sometimes be found in breach of the Constitution. But this is not the case in this particular case, where the court has said you cannot call a state of public emergency. The court is inquiring into circumstances under previous states of emergency in which persons were detained. The court also expressed views about certain regulations in their current form, and we have looked at those formats and we have made revisions so that when they are promulgated again, they are not in the form in which the concerns have been raised. So governments have to act. It has to act. It is a reality, and it has been recognized by the highest courts all over. You really can't fold your hand, and in taking action, it is not in contempt of any issue that is raised before the court, because you do know what amounts to contempt of court. But governments have to act. And so asking questions, debating the issues, those are quite fine. And we can only improve ourselves with the deeper interrogation of what needs to be done. But bear in mind that the government has to act, and the government is acting within the limits of the law. If and when the court makes pronouncements otherwise, we will revise, but we will still have to act and take into account those pronouncements and make corrective actions if need be.
Thank you, AG. Our final 4 questions will come up shortly. I recognize Ms. Tanisha Mundell. Tanisha, can you remind us of your media entity and ask your 2 questions, please? Ms. Mundell? All right, I'm not seeing. Tanisha? All right, then let's move on, since we're not getting Tanisha on. I know her hand was up. Mr. Andre Wright from The Gleaner. Andre, you're on. Your questions, please.
Yes, pleasant good day. One, for the AG, is the AG saying that we can expect detentions of more than a year without charge under this new SOEs?
Unequivocally no. Unequivocally
okay.
no.
Unequivocally no. Thank you, ma'am. 2, Prime Minister spoke about the efficacy of the states of emergency in the past. However, it was quite clear that there was a balloon effect. So where the states of emergency may have been successful in reducing murders and shootings in specific zones, otherwise they started to climb. And we started to see national statistics which showed negligible, if any, movement in the suppression of crime. The Prime Minister would be aware of that. So what's going to be different this time around? And third, this would be to the police commissioner and the head of the army. There has been a ballooning of complaints to INDICOM about soldiers and police. I think the year in 2020 stats showed about a 25 to 48%, somewhere there. Don't call me, but certainly was somewhere 25% to 40% increase of either of them in terms of complaints. There has been concern that the militarization of national security may have led to a coarsening of relations and conduct in both the police force and the army. I'd like them to address those concerns.
Thank you, Mr.
Just
Wright.
permit me to amplify the response I have given. So when the regulations are laid in the Parliament, you will see, beginning at Regulation 30, the new detention provision. You will see the time period that is permitted for detention, preventive detention, where it is reasonably necessary to detain a person to prevent him or her from committing an offense, and the time period before a review is done. But the detention scheme under the regulations allow for a review of the circumstances in which the person is detained and to see whether there is reason for continued detention up to the end of the emergency period. So do read the provisions having regard to the entire detention scheme. But the going forward, review of detainees will not only depend on the detainee making a request to the review tribunal. The review tribunal will do a periodic review. The Constitution does say that after an initial review, you don't get another review until 6 weeks. That is in the Constitution. So understand that provision. All right? Thank you.
I just wanted to respond quickly to the notion that SOEs do not work on a national scale. Firstly, when we implemented the SOEs the first time, we saw a greater than 20% reduction in murders nationally. And then we stopped, again, because of the political debate around SOEs. We implemented them late in the following year, and there was a slight increase in murders. We thereafter continued, and murders declined slightly and remained flat. Like all emergency measures, they bring the problem down from the peak and flatten the curve and keep it there until regular institutional measures can be taken, strengthening your investigation, strengthening your intelligence, and then they increase capacity to manage the current level. We have never been able to have a sustained use of the SOEs such that we can maintain the flattening of the curve to allow for normal, regular, conventional policing to take over. And we haven't been able to do it because of this consistent ambivalence and political debate about whether or not it is constitutional. The question asked by Tanisha earlier is clear. The people of Jamaica, the people of Central Kingston, they are impatient of this debate. They want to see their government act. And this government has been acting, and we have also sought to be respectful of all the processes that are involved in our taking action, whether it is the courts, the views of the opposition, the views of the legal fraternity. We have always been very respectful, accommodating, reviewing, incorporating. But I think we are at a juncture in our society where we have to be practical and we have to look at saving lives.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Final two questions. I believe some members of the media, you have answered their questions, so they remove their hands. Our final two questions then will come from Zara Burton, real quick two questions, and Mr. William Mitchell of Nationwide. Zara, real quickly. Not hearing from Zara. Maybe that the question has been answered.
I'm here.
Oh,
Are
wonderful.
you hearing me?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Good morning, everybody. My questions are for the Prime Minister, and Prime Minister, they're long, so I don't know if you want to take notes while I'm asking.
If only we could, if we only we could limit them a little, Zara, please.
The first question is, When it came to light that now deceased Pathways Pastor Kevin Smith deemed his congregants to be unclean who took the vaccine, you reminded pastors that they should respect
I'm sorry, sir.
people.
What you were saying, could you just repeat that part, please?
Are you hearing me okay?
Somehow there was just a little breaking in what you were saying earlier. So could you start again?
Oh, sorry. I'm going to start again. When it came to light that now deceased Pathways pastor Kevin Smith deemed his congregants who had taken the vaccine to be unclean, you reminded pastors publicly.
Unclean, okay.
Right. You reminded pastors publicly that they should respect people's personal choice. How come you haven't said the same thing publicly to private companies that are mandating vaccines for their workers? That's question one.
Could I just answer that quickly? Because
Yes.
my statements, whenever or wherever they were made, were totally unconnected to those issues relating to that specific matter you raised. And for the record, I have not in any way addressed that matter publicly or privately. As far as I'm concerned, that is a police matter. My statements were in regard to our national campaign for vaccination, and it may have missed you, but I also said on several occasions that the process that the government would have to go through is one of, first of all, public education, consultation, and then moving together as one nation towards a vaccine target of 65% or more. And I have said that companies have attained high levels of vaccination precisely by taking the route that the government has suggested. First, educating their workers. Thirdly, having a collaborative process with them, and then making it accessible, and then building cohesion within the work group towards taking the vaccine. This is the strategy that I have said from day one, when the question was first asked, and then I have been very clear about going through this process, which respects the rights of all Jamaicans. And once you have gone through that process, my own view on the matter is that I believe more Jamaicans will be educated about the process, they will feel more comfortable about the process, and they will be more willing to make rational and logical decisions in favor of their own health.
Thank you, Prime Minister. All right. I'm sorry, hello?
I have my other question.
Can we just stick one more in, Zara, please? I beg you. We have been at this for a little bit, and we are dealing with the matter of the states of public emergency just announced.
Right, but this is important too. Of 84 serious events after vaccine so far, 4 serious adverse events have been deemed vaccine-related product reactions or vaccine product-related reactions, based on data from Ministry of Health. Has the government of Jamaica yet given any thought to, made any moves toward implementing a compensation scheme for those who get injured from the vaccine or their surviving relatives?
All right, thank you so much, Zara. The Prime Minister may just answer that, and then we'll focus back on the states of public emergency and end with William Mitchell's questions.
Zara, I believe you have asked questions that are worth reviewing. I am not in a position, as you can imagine, I am prepared to deal with the SOE matter. I do have some opinions on what you have raised, but my opinions need to be tempered with discussions in more detail with the Ministry of Health and, of course, obviously, the Attorney General. So I've taken note of your questions, Zara, and at an appropriate time, I suspect the Ministry of Health or other appropriate authorities should be able to say something on the matter.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Our final question then comes from Mr. William Mitchell.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, all. Right, so I have a question for the Prime Minister and also a question for the security forces. So, Mr. Prime Minister, you have called on stakeholders, including entertainers, to indicate that messages promoting the gun and murder culture are not to be encouraged. So what is your reaction to how prominently at least 2 artists have featured in the anti-gang trial that's now ongoing in the Supreme Court? The matter before the court, and your general reaction in general terms, how important is that matter before the court, being the Klansman trial? How important is that matter to the national security agenda? That's one.
You have raised some very important questions, which I'm eager to answer. But in your question, you have put in a phrase, matters before the court. And I am very careful, sir. Once a matter is before the courts, we pay the due respect of not saying anything at all that could in any way influence the outcome. So I am guided by the Attorney General, and I hear the Commissioner saying, so I hate to use this term, but no comment, my friend. After the case is over, then we can have a fulsome conversation on that.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And I believe that's it in terms of questions, William? All right, fantastic. Prime Minister and members of the Cabinet, and of course our security chiefs, thank you so much for our press briefing this morning. Of course, announcing the SOEs in 7 police divisions and locations across Jamaica. Thank you all, those who tuned in live on radio and, of course, online for this media briefing. We wish you a wonderful rest of Sunday. Good morning.